This is Xerxes from Hardcore Gaming 101, and you're listening to Pixelated Audio episode 147.
Welcome back to Pixelated Audio, a podcast focusing on game audio, its history, and the people behind it. We're your hosts. I'm Brian, and this is Gene.
Hey, everyone. As you know, we like to talk about games from a lot of different perspectives, and lately we've been talking to a lot of members of the broader VGM and gaming community. Today, we have a special guest joining us from Hardcore Gaming 101 and their related podcast, Top 47K Games. Brian and I have been huge fans of both the show and the podcast for a number of years now, and we're very happy to bring you the show's main host and producer, Xerxes. Welcome, and thanks for joining in.
Hi, glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so Xerxes brought a number of tracks with him today. Looking at the track list, it just fits completely in with this show.
Oh, there's so much crossover between our shows. It's great.
Yeah. But first off, that track that brought us in was the main menu from the SNES version of Pebble Beach Golf Links, released in 1992, composed by Yumi Satake, or Yumi Kinoshita, the married name, as she was known at the time. And Xerxes, tell us a little bit about this track.
So this track, if you're familiar with my show, you might recognize it. It's one of our. It forms a part of one of our two kind of main themes that we've been using. So I think he's a friend of your show as well as mine. And Norm is the MC who does the kind of introduction rap on the main theme song for the show.
I catch myself singing that like all the time. It just
Dog's Bower.
It randomly pops up like in my day. I'll just be driving down the street and I'll just be like, Dog's Bower. Like,
yeah, me too. Me too.
Thanks, Norm.
I mean, it's excellent. Like I if I had known how long I was like, when I first kind of commissioned that, I was thinking, oh, this would be kind of a cool thing to do for like a little while, and then we can go back, or maybe I'll find something else. But everybody loves it so much. I'm like, oh, I can't get rid of it. I got to keep it. I love it. It's good. It's a part of the show now.
Yeah, it's really good. It flows so well too. Like you found all the right, I was trying to think like, oh, what if he did a rap for our show? It just like, it's Brian and Gene. It just wouldn't go together. Like it doesn't flow as well.
I think he could make it work. Like all my only instructions to Norm were like, he's familiar with the show. So I'm like, kind of like, can you just set out like, this is what we do and who we are? And then like whatever else you want to throw in there. And the rest of it is all him. Like I didn't give him any other instructions on that. I think I said like 100 beats per minute just to make it easy. But the thing of it is actually kind of long for a podcast intro. And like the full one you'll hear on our Patreon episodes. That's right. Now I switched it over, so all the Patreon episodes going forward are just the full Norm theme song without me at all, because I figure if you're paying money to hear more of the show, then you probably know everything about it.
We get it by now, kind of thing.
Yeah, it took me only 3 years to figure that out. And so I wanted to do a shorter version of it, and I thought, well, what'd be cool is like when I was a younger man, I think this is still a thing now, but I used to love to check out like the late night DJs on like the hip hop stations, because they would do like these big mix hours and stuff like that, where they just take whatever was popular at the time and kind of mix it up and maybe throw in some like do like a mashup with other songs or things like that. And it had this is this kind of truncated thing to it where you could like the beginning of it would often be just like some part, like just some lyric or some verse or just a few words, and it just be replayed over and over in different ways, and then it would finally let a good 16 bars go, and then it would switch over to something else. So I was like, well, maybe I can do something like that, but I don't actually have any talent. I don't have not a DJ, and never even thought about doing that. But I thought, well, if I can make something that sounds kind of like it, and I could do it shorter, and maybe that would be good. So that's what I did, and I went through like 4 different versions of the backing track before I settled on the Pebble Beach score. And for some reason, I find that like golf games have way better music than they have any right to, like golf and billiards.
Best music. It's ridiculous. Yeah. It's a running joke on our show, like golf games, sports games, and porn games, of course.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's usually how it works.
Yeah. So that's why I ended up just sticking with that one, just because I could get it to work. And it's a hard thing to do because, you know, I mean, he did it over just like Norm did his lines over just like a kind of standard backing beat. I think he actually made a pretty cool little beat that maybe I'll have to use in the future. But he did, you know, there's a flow to it that if you change too much of, you know, much of the backing track, it's not going to work anymore. And
getting it slightly out of sync or you know, something's not going to match up. Yeah.
It's not just sync, but there's like a flow to it that I can't, you know, I don't rap, so I don't know anything about this, but there's like a way that he delivers
like a cadence to the, like, you know, it can't fall on a certain beat and then the next line can't fall. Yeah. There's like a poetry behind it. I get you.
Yeah. So that was the main thing I was having problems with, is everything I tried to put with it just didn't sound right. It sounded like it was fighting with him for control of the tune. And luckily, Pebble Beach Golf Links had my back. So
nice.
Do we have that? I actually have something. I made something for this show.
Yeah, we have it right now. It's the golf remix.
Yes.
That you did.
So this is. I don't think anyone's heard this yet. There's two cool things about this. Number one, it's the remix thing, but it has Norm's like second verse in there, which is the really fast part. And that was, it's honestly, in my opinion, it still doesn't quite match up right, but I did the best I could. But the other thing is it's in stereo. So when we encode all of our shows, we encode it in mono. So when I made these theme songs, I did them in single channel because it just, you know, it saves on server space. And most people are listening in their cars or in an earbud or something. They can't tell the difference anyway. In fact, I don't know whether anyone's ever mentioned it to me that the show is in mono, that they noticed. But it is. And so this is a stereo introduction of the golf remix. And,
well, fortunately, we care less about our listeners' data plans, and we do everything in stereo because it works for a music podcast.
Oh, yeah,
so we have to do that.
We're gonna have your voice in 5.1 surround, Xerxes.
Yeah. So you're kind of spinning around the center right now. Cool. Yeah. So let's take a listen. This is HG101 Golf Remix, composed by Yumi Satake.
HG101, the main source, scientific. HG101, the main source, Xerxes of Hardcore Hardcore Gaming. When they read them, Hardcore Gaming. And then notice the affection, cause every sentence reflects on their attention to perfection. A selected collection of information to reference and recollect what the preferences lean to Asian or Western. Yeah. Don't forget the UK and them HG101 and never be the same again. Dogs bow. Dogs bow.
It gets me every time.
Dogs Bauer. I like how he just like casually mentions Dogs Bauer and then like Dogs Bauer yells at the end.
Yeah, that was all him. Yeah.
Yeah. What was the Dogs Bauer thing? Like why did that even become a thing? I've heard it as a running joke for a while, but
it was like an ad lib, right? That's the story I heard.
It was, I think it goes back to the original podcast. So before we did the top 47K games format, I started a podcast that wasn't really affiliated with HG101. It was just sort of, I think it was just congealed through the forum and maybe the IRC channel long ago. I think back in late 2011. So like right when everybody was getting into Skyrim. That's how long ago this was.
Wow.
And yeah, it's like I think we did an episode on Blue Stinger, which is the game with, you know, it's a Dreamcast game. It's got the Dogs Bauer character in it, and he's just like this big fat party animal who owns a boat. And he's one of my favorite characters in video games, just because he looks exactly the part. Like he's got this like tight yellow like windsurfing t-shirt that's tucked into some cut off jeans. shorts.
I remember it well. I think it was even in one of the promo shows or promo videos for like the Dreamcast when they were. It was like Funko Land. I remember seeing Blue Stinger stuff everywhere, and Dog's Bowers like right there in the mix. Yeah.
And we just like him so much, or at least I do, that I like. It's almost not even funny anymore. But when we switched over to doing the top games thing, the ending of of each show, the last usually like 10, 15 minutes, on at least when we're doing it right, is ranking the game on a list of all the other games we've ranked thus far. So when we were starting out, we didn't have that many games on the list, and some of your rankings had ended up being kind of arbitrary because it's like there's actually this big gulf in between like quality levels of these two things. And so like one of the joke things in there was I would give a game, bonus points for having a Dog's Bower-esque character in it. Or somebody
I remember that.
Yeah, I remember that too. Yeah. I was like what? Like, cool. Yeah. All right, bonus points.
People, I'm that joke quickly wore out its welcome, and a good 40 episodes later I stopped doing it as much. But Dogs is still a part of the show through that through that ad lib.
Yeah, we know it well. We're only 20 episodes out from Harold Hardtooth, and he still hasn't overstayed his welcome.
No, in fact, we give bonus points to any game that has a toothpaste reference. So,
have you guys done Black Attack? I don't think there's any music in it, but
I don't think so. Yeah, it doesn't quite fit the show.
But not yet. But we might have to have Norm do some remixes that at least describes it.
Yeah.
So Norm did want to say hi, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
Hi, Norm.
And I'm glad you mentioned all of the stuff about how you made the beat, because that was one of his questions. And Norm, if you're listening, and which I'm sure you are, we love having you on the show, and you're a great member of our team. So thanks again.
He's also just like the nicest guy.
Absolutely. Yeah, he was on our Home Alone episode, and he was more charitable to the music than anybody had any right to be.
Yeah, he's I don't think I ever see him saying any disparaging comment about much of anything. It's just not his style.
It's because he just bottles it up.
Yeah,
it's going to get unleashed on a random day one time. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, I mean, so to make that though, like there's like other stuff I had to do to get it to kind of work. So I think I definitely like split the tracks up so I could remix them literally by adjusting the levels of each thing. So you'll notice that like the egg shaker sound is barely in the Super Nintendo original, but the egg shaker sound is like way forward on this one. So it's like, I don't know whether it's an egg shaker or if it's like one of those weird like wooden things where you like drag the stick across like a ribbed wooden tube.
Like a washboard, or I know what you're talking about. Like
I know the instrument. I think the guiro. I always forget what it's actually called.
Yeah, something like that.
And so that's way up. The bass is way up. Then there's like some instruments that kind of drop out at different times, and I tweaked it a lot to make sure that it fit. And then on top of that, I had to deal with like, how do you make it sound like you're scratching a record, because I'm not actually doing that. And it's kind of like, there are just like sound banks or like soundboards of people doing like, they just record them doing scratches, and that's part of it, but it doesn't sound right. So what I had to do there was, in addition to the scratch, when I would have a Norm, saying something that I was, pretending that I was scratching on a record, I would, in Audacity or whatever I was using, I would like adjust, like do the graduated like speed and tone adjust a little bit. Just like, at the beginning and end. So it sounds like your fingers are physically touching an object, and it's not going to, when it starts up, it's not going to be at the actual correct speed right away. It'll sound close, but it's going to have this weird like warping effect to the ends of it. And then on top of that, there's like all there's obviously there's like drum samples and stuff going on there. I can tell you what they are. I actually looked this up because I forgot. So the beginning, it's the Detroit Emeralds, Getting a Little Too Smart, 1973. So like these are all classic samples.
Ooh, nice.
The second part, there's a drum fill in there that's from Fat Larry's band, Down on the Avenue, 1976. And I think it probably is the thing Fat Larry is best known for these days, I'm guessing. And
could you say that a little louder for our copyright lawyers, just so just so you know.
It's transformative use, baby. I can do what I want. No,
this is an educational podcast.
The ending is the Meters, the great New Orleans R&B group, the Meters, doing
nice.
Hey
Very,
Last
very nice.
Minute 1970. And and then there's my obligatory James Brown, like,
Yeah.
that goes into everything I do. So just my credit to like one of my musical heroes. Not the nicest guy, but great musician.
That being said, let's move on to our next track that you got picked out for us. This is called Howl of Crow, and this is from a game called Blackbird Tori Tachi no Tooboe.
That was Howl of Crow from Blackbird Tori Tachi no Tooboe, composed by Takeaki Watanabe.
It's a pretty killer track. This is awesome.
Yeah.
Oh my god, I loved it.
Which is weird because Howl of Crow is kind of like this. So Tori Tachi no Tooboe is like the crow is like calling, and this is like Howl of Crow. So it's like kind of like Howl. It's kind of like the name of the game. So this must be like a theme or something.
I wonder if it's like a subtle pun or something that we just don't pick up on. I do know that like
Could be.
like crows, like to the Japanese ear, like a crow call, like ah, you know, like that sound. So then it sounds like it's saying aho, aho, like fool,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I wonder, I don't know. This is weird. I looked it up just today because I'm like, I should probably know what this game was. And yeah, sure enough, it's an erotic game. You wouldn't think that from the title, would you?
No, or from the music, I thought it was a shoot 'em up. It sounded like a 90s vertical shooter where you're in a spaceship.
It just rips.
Oh my god.
Yeah. It's very strange. It is an adventure game. Correct? I think it's just like almost like a dungeon crawler adventure themed game. I mean, we're riding on the heels of our last episode, which is an adult themed PC 98 game. So
yeah, I just listened to it.
About hunting
girls,
cyborgs,
right?
Yes.
Yeah, Heart
Heat Girls.
That one I looked it up because I was like, this doesn't sound like it's particularly. I think it's more like, I think if you went to that game and you were looking for like, you know, salacious content, you would be very disappointed.
Oh, absolutely.
Like
we were talking about it.
It's a Cinemax movie, basically.
Yeah, it's a Cinemax movie, exactly.
I'd say not even that from the looks of it. Like,
maybe not. Yeah,
I mean, the other thing too is like it's also like age appropriate dialogue, right? So it's not necessarily just the scenes, but it's also the banter between characters that would not necessarily be in a Doraemon game or something, for the kids. So,
I don't know. I've seen some pretty saucy Anpanman episodes.
True. But yeah, no, the game itself, I mean, this Blackbird is definitely on the other end of the spectrum for adult games. It's a lot more adult, I guess. There's like a lot of like sex scenes and stuff like that thrown in. From what I gather, I haven't actually played this game, so
yeah, so you guys probably have touched on this on your show before, but one of the reasons why I think that you get stuff like this in this kind of game, right? This is some composer just going out, just taking this all the way to the cliffs of insanity in terms of composition and everything. It's like as good as anything you're going to hear in like a mainstream, Genesis game or something like that. But it's probably somebody who's just starting out or is like, a wonderkin type, like savant. And this is good work that you can get. It's like good paying work. And the people who make these games, like there's usually smaller publishers and they're just trying to sell games. So like having a little bit of erotic content or a lot or making that the entire game, I think that's just like part of what you do to sell, to move units. I
was thinking to myself, like, I don't support erotic content, but if I were, Japanese in the 90s or late 80s, I would have definitely been, programming these kind of games to make a living. Because honestly, this was what was big over there in the 90s. That's like, if we look at all of these doujin groups, like these independent game companies, a lot of them went this direction because it was easy money. It was like you had an audience already there. And if you could add a good story and some gameplay on top of it, then there's just that extra level. And a lot of the game composers, I don't think they really cared so much about the game. Like for them, it didn't really matter. It was just like, I want people to hear my stuff. And guess what? If you're reading some dialogue on the screen, but there's not a lot of action, I think you're going to get a lot more out of the music, and it needs to be more cinematic in that sense too.
Well, I think this also goes back to something that Xerxes said. You have these composers that are just going all out, and like, who's going to stop them? You write something like this, and your publisher's going to be like, this isn't really appropriate for our porn game. I'm sorry. Can you tone it down a little bit? Like, they don't care.
This is a shower scene. This is a shower scene, and
There's like Yngwie Malmsteen in the background, just wailing, just absolutely shredding on his synth guitar.
She's just wrapped in a towel right now. Like, you tone it down a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's part. I think to understand why they did this, my guess, I don't know. I've never talked to anybody about it. It seems like kind of a touchy issue, maybe, but I think that a part of it was like, what can we do on a Japanese microcomputer? Like, especially the PC-98, which in the 90s was getting pretty long in the tooth. And what can we do on this platform that you're just not going to get on the consoles, right? And the things you could do are adult content. You can just have like some incredible, it's incredible to us now because we love it so much, but the FM synth and all that. And you can have stuff, you can have crazy scene inappropriate music whenever you want. I think that helped sell this kind of thing. That was a part of their aesthetic. And
absolutely, I like what you said there, because about this being in a mainstream game, for example, like it's this weird era in gaming history, because you weren't going to get past Sega or Nintendo putting adult content on the system.
Absolutely
so
not.
Really, your only viable platform to release this is going to be in the personal computer market. Anyways, let's move on.
What's our next track?
Yeah, what do we got?
Oh, this is from Drakkhen, I think. This is just the character-making song from Drakkhen, the SNES port of the Amiga RPG.
Awesome. Let's take a listen. We'll be right back. That was the character creation or character making music from Drakkhen on the Super Nintendo, released in 1991, composed by Hiroyuki Masuno.
I gotta say, with this track, it's a little, it's early in the life of the Super Nintendo. It's definitely a little bit simplistic on the sample side, but that's such J-Fusion energy right there.
That is like, yeah, that's a whole thing now. I mean, that bass player, if he were a real person and not just like a channel on the, would just need to be chained up somewhere because he's out of control.
It's really good. It's a lot of energy that you don't expect really to pop out from that bass. And there is a lot of like front loading for the sound. It's a real big sound really early on, but when that bass kicks into full gear, it's on a whole other level. In fact, based on what you were saying, Gene, too, kind of early samples, there's a lot of games really early in the life cycle that when they that like the trumpety samples, when they get kind of in the higher range, they kind of detune a little bit. Could be the emulation, it could be a few other things here, but it doesn't really swallow you until that bass comes in. When it does, then this track is just off the hook.
Did anybody else find this game itself inscrutable? Because I played Drakkhen and I could not figure it out.
I didn't like it at all.
It is one of the most bizarre experiences you will ever have. I think there's like, I can't remember what it's called. If you just Google like Drakkhen SNES worst game ever, you'll find there's like a 50-second YouTube video that somebody made of just like the most absurd things that happen to you in Drakkhen. Like you're bumping into a tree and you can't stop, or like you walk into water and your party just wades into the water and drowns to death, or you're just walking around somewhere at night and then a giant like panther head shows up and starts shooting lasers at you. You run into weird people in random battles who just make these horrible sounds.
I just remember the characters milling about, but now I need to watch this video because I have no idea about any of that other stuff.
We're going to have to add it to our show notes.
Yeah.
And now I want Norm, he does the Rise from Your Grave. He does like these voiceover things. And now I'm wanting him to do a Drakkhen remix with all the voices in that. That'd be good.
It's a weird alienating game, but yeah, I've always loved the music. I love almost all the songs in there are really great. They are, as the kids would now say, bops. I think that's what they say.
I think we're all out of touch.
I think we're all displaced.
Yeah. But I love this. I use this one on I think some of our like promos. Like we're on a podcast network, and so we got to put out promos where you talk about the show, where you have some clips from the show, and the need there is to have some kind of music in the background that grabs your attention right away. And I felt like this is like Seinfeld acid jazz slap bass thing. It was perfect. And it just kind of like, I mean, if anything, it oversells the show. Like it's not that kinetic of a show, but I've always loved
really hardcore gaming.
Yeah, I definitely remember this one from the show. I think you're right. It plays during some like not ad breaks. I feel like that's selling the show a little short.
This one actually, now that you mention it, this one actually is an outro as well. I did that as well. So I guess that's what we like. So all the songs I picked here are songs that I use as part of the show. So originally, going back to the old Game Club podcast in the first maybe year and a half or so of the Top Games version, I would try to have a closing track that was actually from the game, or at least one of the games that we talked about. Mm-hmm. And that was really hard because a lot of times you'll get a game and it might have excellent music, but there's nothing in there that has the kind of finality, or
we call it staff roll energy around here.
Big staff roll energy, right? It's got this kind of like, well, mainly what it is that most game music, as everybody knows, is meant to be looped, just ad infinitum. As long as it takes you to beat the stage, that's how long that music's going to loop. But the ending music, of course, staff rolls and things, they don't have that problem. So they can have this big, crazy change, this dynamic thing that where the song will do something that doesn't loop easily, right?
Yeah,
take a big shift. And so when we moved to doing one game per episode, 2 episodes per week, which is plus a Patreon episode, which is a lot of stuff to do. And
you guys must be busy. Like that's a lot.
Yeah, it's me. I'm the one who does it. I'm super busy. But one of the ways I try to, because of that, I try to take away as much of the work as I can. So one of the things I had to do was like, instead of doing like a fresh intro and outro where I'm talking in and out of each episode, I record a couple of them that are basically the same, and they go at the beginning and end. And so I try to I can't do, the music from the game for each episode, because number one, I'd have to a lot of times I have to loop something to make my dialogue stuff fit. Right. So and looping stuff is not fun sometimes. But in addition to that, because I couldn't use the game audio, and because before we moved to the network, we didn't have any ads, so I had no like act breaks or ad breaks where I could put in game music. I felt like I have got to have like a variety. I've got to have something that sounds really, really good. It's got to be something that nobody's expecting, nobody's heard anywhere else before. I found that number one, golf games are good. Shoot 'em ups are strangely have some great staff roles in there for whatever reason. And
that is weird. They're always like super emotional ballads after a game of like just pumping
like
high
face
octane
melting
stuff for 40 minutes.
Right. Yeah. Right. It's. I think it's just like the composer just like, I want to do anything but what I did. Like, I did all those things and I want to do something different. And it's a chance to show off and everything. But like having that change in those songs, that's what I'm always looking for. Wherever, sometimes like it happens like within 10 seconds. And so, but if I can loop that first 9 seconds convincingly, then I'll use it. And sometimes the results can be really good. And that's one of them where I think I did, because I have so it goes do 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 do. Like you can just loop that until I'm done doing the outro spiel.
Yep.
And then it goes do do do.
Love it.
But what you don't get on the show is the stereo effect, where there's so much stuff panning from left to right to left. There's like almost stereo audio illusions going on in there. It's really intense. I don't even think I ever noticed that when I was a kid, because I was playing this on like a 17-inch RCA, TV.
Right. There was probably, both speakers right next to each other anyway.
Right.
So,
You can't
sounds
tell.
mono. Yeah. I mean, it's like I'm listening with headphones, and it's even more pronounced, more defined, that way. And, a lot of like game audio that you listen to with headphones is not usually how you would have heard it, unless it's like Game Boy music or something like that. As a kid, I did a lot of Game Boy headphone stuff, but it's almost like hearing it a lot of the times in a new way, because we didn't really have except for like the Genesis that had a
Had a volume
Headphone port. Yeah.
Volume fader and a headphone jack on there. Aside from that, I didn't even have headphones as a kid anyway, so I don't think there was a lot of opportunity to hear it that way. So
So did we say the composer of this track?
Not of this one. I mean, we mentioned it when we brought it in.
When we brought it in. Yeah. So Hiroyuki Masuno worked on Spy vs. Spy, Deja Vu, Shadowgate, The Uninvited, all for the NES.
Yep.
Yeah. You notice a trend in those game selections, right? I think these were all Kimco.
Yeah.
So they're all Kimco did a lot of porting PC games, like American and European PC games, and porting them to home consoles. And they had a lot of success with that. And it's interesting because you'd see that kind of, the smart publishers did that. Like Konami did the same thing. Like they, in Japan, they had the MSX stuff that they were like one of the earliest adopters of the MSX standard. And they used it kind of like as a farm club for their console games. And they could, experiment with stuff, find out what worked, and they could bring it over to the consoles. Well, you don't have that in the West, because you don't have the MSX for the most part. I mean, kind of in Europe, but not really. And so what Ultra Games did for the most part was they just picked like stuff that was popular on Commodore 64 and brought that to consoles.
Right.
And then Kimco did the same thing. They took like what was popular on like a lot of these games are Mac Venture games, and just put those onto the NES. And they actually had a lot of success with that, I think. And Drakkhen was an Amiga game. It was developed by, I think, Infogrames or somebody, or published by Infogrames on the Amiga.
Sounds about right.
And that game has almost no music. It's no comparison. It's probably a better version of the game all told, but it doesn't have the music, so just who cares?
Well, that's kind of the Japanese games way. Like we talk a lot about what was that game? Brian, you know what I'm talking about. We had it on our 6th episode.
I'm drawing a blank now too.
Was Mad Overlord? What is that?
Oh, Wizardry.
Yes, Wizardry.
Yes.
God, thank you.
like it was the most common thing. They would take these like essentially DOS or Mac PC games and then like make them into something almost wholly different with new graphics, new music, completely transform the games.
And they would introduce them to the Japanese market, which is like, another thing in all in itself, because that was kind of breaking from the mold that was currently going on in development over in Japan. So really interesting that the company was doing. I think we brought this up in a episode. We talked about it for kind of a long time, but yeah. You know what? Let's jump. We have more questions actually for you, Xerxes or Rob. Let's get into this next track. You mentioned Staff Roll earlier, and I was like, oh man, it's the perfect segue. Now we're just going to play Staff Roll anyway, with no context. So this is Staff Roll, the OPN version from Metal Force.
Yeah, so that was Staff Roll from Metal Force by Daisuke Takahashi. That's a PC 98 game. It was released in 1993. And yeah, another game I have not played and do not know much about, but I think it's what is it, Metal? What kind of game is it actually? I forget now. I looked it up, but now I can't remember.
This is a game I actually couldn't tell you. I never played it.
I don't think it's an adult game. I
don't think so either.
Don't Google it at work, just in case I'm wrong. But
let me Google it now. Metal Force.
I see a ship on the cover.
It's a shooter.
It's a shooter. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, it's a shooter.
Yeah, we got a lot of those. I mean, I remember years ago when I got my I bought a PC engine, like the classic original PC engine, really tiny. I bought it while I was in Japan, brought it back, and I'm looking at games.
Around when did you buy it? I'm just curious.
I want to say it was around like 2013, maybe.
Okay.
And at that time, you could get a lot of, especially the Hue cards and stuff. You could get a lot of those really cheap in Japan, and so I just bought like a bunch of stuff that I didn't even know what it was. And I was playing it, and I was talking to people on maybe our Discord, or maybe this is still in the IRC days. And I was saying like, wow, this is a lot of shooters.
Oh, yeah. And so many shooters on the PC engine.
Right.
Which I'm not against them, but like I didn't want to do nothing but shooters. And it's like, Yeah, that's what we have. We have shooters and
Bonk.
Yeah.
And Bloody Wolf. Don't forget
Bloody Wolf.
the game where you play as like Arnie and Stallone, friends forever, basically.
Yeah. Metal Force actually has not only an OPN soundtrack, but an OPN-A soundtrack. What prompted you to choose the OPN version?
I can't remember whether I had access to both versions, but I most likely, if I did, I probably just listened to them side by side, and I just liked the sound. Like, in my opinion, like not all the time, but the OPN soundtracks versions, sometimes they have a little bit more punch to them, and that's really what I'm going for when I'm picking it out. Like the slightly more advanced chip might have, like, it might be better overall, but for my purposes, it's usually I just want like something that just like reaches out and grabs your attention.
I know what you mean. Sometimes the composer, like depending on the composer, we've seen some do much better when they have a lot more limitation rather than kind of trying to use every channel and it just becoming more of like a kind of just a lot of noise, like over articulated sound, I guess.
Yeah.
So
I listened to this one too. It's not drastically different in the other sound chip. So I think it still sounds great here as it is.
Right. So Daisuke Takahashi worked on Melty Lancer, Ground Seed, the OPN version of that, and Final Crisis, Terrestrial Defense Police. Other than Ground Seed, I played Melty Lancer. Final Crisis, I'm trying to pinpoint what that is.
I think they're also both shmups, but I don't remember. And I think he was a minor contributor to Ground Seed, but still was a credit on there.
Yeah. Yeah, so, one thing that we didn't bring up earlier on that we wanted to circle back around to, and we just kind of like went on tangents, but Xerxes, one wanted to ask, when you started getting into game audio, or what is your background for gaming in general? Because you don't really talk about that on your show, so maybe you can kind of fill us in on some of that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm of the NES generation. I got that when I was still pretty little, and I don't know when I first noticed the music. I would say that probably. Oh no, I do. It would have been when I first played Metroid, right? The original Metroid, the Hip Tanaka soundtrack for that it's a very odd soundtrack. There's a lot of times where it feels kind of monotonous, but it's monotonous on purpose. And I mean, the title song has a lot of weird choices in it too, but it all sort of made sense to me. And I also like the kind of atmospheric elements of it. There's like, when you get to the mother brain, it's like barely even music. It's just like this, bubbling, pulsating.
Right.
And I thought that was so cool. Like I loved how it just took me by surprise, I think, my little kid brain, where you go to the lower levels, like the little other areas where you fight like the mini bosses and everything. You think the music's going to get more intense, right? Because you're going to a harder area, but it actually gets like slower and more creepy. And I don't know, something about that really stuck with me. And then from then, then I played Mega Man games, and the music was just great.
Obviously, yeah.
And that's about it. I think I did this. You probably that entire generation. If this kind of music stuck out to you, you probably did the thing where you tried to tape it onto like a
I think all of us did.
Oh yeah, Mega Man 2 was it for me. That was the one that it was like, this is good music. I don't know what it was about it, but it was probably Flash Man or Crash Man.
And it kind of stuck with me, I think. Like I think chiptunes benefit from two things that makes them stand out. Like the big obvious one is like the nostalgia factor. Like people it reminds them of being kids. And like, there's this whole aspect of like, there's being young and experiencing video games and learning and developing a love for them that you can never do again. You only get to do that once in your life. And so there's kind of like this, you're getting a peek back into the thrill of playing it, because sometimes the music's the thing that withstands the test of time the most. Like you might not want to go back and play the original Mega Man ever again, but the music is still really good. And I think the other thing is that I found this out much, much later, but I don't know whether it's children or just everybody, but I think it's mostly young people, like really young kids, respond to chiptunes in a way that they don't respond to other music. And I don't know why that is.
I've heard that. I don't know if there's an actual study behind it. I was curious myself, and I have heard that from several people. personally, I don't know. I would like to know more about that, but there's something about like the simplicity of like square waves or certain rhythms or something like that
I think they like fake sounds. I think that's what it is. I don't know exactly how that makes sense. It probably doesn't, but I also noticed like with my kid, like around the same time he would hear me play, like, cause I would fire up, the NES and play a game. He'd really like the music or something like that. And then we started, playing. I had a flash cartridge for my NES where you could just load up NSF files on it and just listen to them. And we go like, listening to stuff like that way. He really liked that too. And he found like, the Streets of Rage soundtrack, and that like made him a Streets of Rage fan. Like he's played Streets of Rage 4 and I still haven't. He's finished it already. So, but he
good kid.
But he also really responded to, at that time, like late 70s, early 80s, like reggae music, which is at that time that they were starting to move more into like synthesized sounds and like weird effects and like weird dub effects. And there'd just be like some guy like doing like a proto rap over it. And he really loved it because it'd be like, have these like weird laser beam sounds and stuff like that in it. He thought that was really cool. And I wonder whether there's a connection there. Maybe there is, maybe. So, somebody should devote their life's work to it and then tell me what happens,
Well, I will say this. I know reggae was actually a pretty big influence on Hip Tanaka. His creation of the sound chip for the NES. So there's kind of that like, the reason why the chip is built out the way it is because he was so fond of reggae music and the parts. That's why the bass is the bass, basically.
Yeah. You could really hear it in like the Gyromite soundtrack. That like I think he said his inspiration was a specific bassist, Sly Dunbar, who did, like, but you'd hear it in a reggae song. Like a lot of times the to quote Dr. Dre MD, the rhythm is the bass and the bass is, that's that Warren G. Anyway, one of them said it. The rhythm is the bass and the bass is the treble, right? Like you switch it around. So with Sly Dunbar, you get this, and you can hear how that, like, you can definitely hear how that cycles into, especially his very earliest NES tunes for like those black box games.
Yeah. Yeah. So when did you start getting into like more involved in the community, like beyond just playing as a kid and stuff? Because we're all about the same age, and we all probably went through similar, our first consoles and went through the ages. How did you get more involved into the community to kind of be where you're at as far as doing the podcast and promoting games, stuff like that? Well,
as far as doing the podcast, like what it was like, podcast seemed like a really cool new thing that nobody was trying. And no, but it was kind of like that, where it's like, I'd heard Retronauts. Retronauts, I think, started in 2008. And I heard that and I thought, this is really cool. Like I listened to like the entire body of the Retronauts catalog during like summer, I think, and caught up, and I liked it so much because I had to do a lot of train commuting at the time. This is really good. And I was interested in games in a sense that I never lost interest in them, but I was very dissociated from like what was current in games. Like I think for a long time, the most recent console I had was I think it was a Dreamcast, or no, I had a PS2. And I can't remember I had that generation, right? I had a Dreamcast, I had a PS2, I had a GameCube.
This is already starting to sound a lot like really familiar with both Gene and I. We went through these periods
out over here. I'm like, I had like a PS2 for like 8 years, and then I finally got a 360.
Yeah, and I skipped like 2 whole console generations. So, and I actually never really went back to consoles except the Switch. And then when I finally dove back in, I just got a PC and did it that way. But at the time, I was really into just finding weird stuff. It was also when I was able to travel to Japan more often. I would just find weird stuff, and I was kind of getting into it that way. It's just like a collector mentality.
So tell me about the traveling to Japan. Was it work related, or was
this is pleasure?
Cool.
And when I was first started going, that was probably like the very last couple of years where you could still find cheap retro stuff before like the foreign hordes descended upon Super Potato.
Exactly. And I remember seeing like, just everything was so cheap. And then, I start going back a few years later and everything's like skyrocketing. I got my PC Engine. It was like I was saying for like maybe $20 with, like 5 controllers and several dozen games. Go back now and a Core 2 Duo is, $160. I was like, what the hell happened? I remember seeing an Apple Pippin or even a X68000. You'd see him on the shelf, and I was like, this is too bulky. I don't want to take it home. And now I'm like kicking myself because it was like, $30.
Oh yeah, that's a part of the. It's the name of the game anyway. When you start collecting, is like all you can remember is all the stuff that you didn't get because you were like, that's $50 more than I want to spend. And now
I know. It's like I should have bought Tesla stock 4 years ago. So
I've just gone purely digital because I can't keep up with collecting prices or the space.
I pretty much stopped completely. But
me too.
At the time I started the podcast, it was Retronauts, and that got me. Like, I'm going to dig up my NES. I'm going to get that out. And then I realized that that was when the first like flash cartridges started coming out on the scene, and that was a huge deal too, because like I was buying stuff and collecting it, but it's all the secondhand market anyway. And so I found out, like I saw like tutorials. This is how you can mod your NES so you can use the sound channel from the disc system, right? There's like you just solder one resistor to another one, between 2 pins, and you can do it. And I, learned how to solder just so I could do that. And I got a flash card. So I was playing like, FDS games on my NES and doing all other kinds of horrible, godless things that nature never intended. And it was really cool. And at the time, then I was like, by the end of 2011, I was in Japan that November, and I was thinking like, I think I could do something like this. What hasn't been done? What I can't do Retronauts. Like they're at the top of that game, and I think they still are. I can't do that. But what could I do that would work? And so that's when I had the game club idea, which is not an original idea. A lot of forums were doing it at the time, but the idea of like picking one game and sticking with it and going through it without like looking at FAQs, just relying on each other, on other people in the community to do it. And then at the end of it, we'd have a podcast about our experience, and it worked out pretty well. Like I wouldn't say that show ever became super popular, but because it started on the HG101 forums, and because I know the HG101's owner, founder, editor-in-chief, whatever you want to call him, Kurt Collada, I knew him. I met him after that, but it wasn't long after that. He happened to work in the same city where I was living at the time. Oh, wow. And so I could like meet him on lunch breaks and stuff like that.
Oh, that's rad.
I really like GC9X. I had a note towards the end of the show, but I that's actually why I heard about Top 47K Games. I was with you guys through the entire journey until fateful Obidus basically sapped you of all will to live, and it's like, we can't do this anymore.
It's pretty funny, right? You can hear the point where our will to continue is just gone. Like, I can't do this anymore. But yeah, it's the idea of spending that much time with a game just became sort of. The other thing is that the podcasts were getting to be like 3 hours long.
Oh God!
And editing them would take all month long, and it was just so painful for me to do it. Because it's like this free-form conversation with very little structure, and it was frustrating. And I felt like we got to get focused. We got to have a goal. We got to have something to do where we can say, at this point, the show is over. And then I heard it was a comic book podcast. I don't actually read or buy comic books, but I just stumbled across this show called War Rocket Ajax. They do this thing where they are ostensibly ranking every comic story ever, where people who listen to the show would nominate comics stories, whether they were like multi-issue things or a single issue or whatever, and then they would rank them on a list. I'm like, now that is a concept. I can do that with games. And at the same time, I think like shortly thereafter, it was like HG101 was undergoing like a website redesign and kind of putting forward like a more, like if you remember the original Hardcore Gaming 101 website, it looked like it was sub GeoCities, and on purpose. Like that was Kurt's idea. Like he's like, why should I put in all this? Like I just want to put the info out there for the fans to find it. And that's when I discovered the website, and I loved it for that. But at a certain point, it was just like, this is hard to read on mobile phones, and you got to do something. And so as a part of that, like I got involved in that redesign, and like the podcast became a much more central and forward part of the website. to the point where people like kind of wonder why it's not more like the website. And I don't know, really have an answer for them. Like the website Hardcore Gaming 101, I feel like most of your listeners will at least have some familiarity with it, because like the games that you guys talk about, sometimes the only place you'll find any info on them at all is going to be HG101.
And that applies to us as well. Occasionally, and I say this with a lot of respect, we love HG101 as a resource. It's come up numerous times because not very many people in the English-speaking world are doing this kind of digging, and it's much appreciated.
Right.
Yeah, and to be clear, I'm not the one doing the digging. I've written like maybe 2.5 articles, and they're really short. I'm not a writer for the...
Well, there's two parts of it, right? So HG101, the website, I kind of look at as more of a resource, right? Like an information resource. Whereas the podcast is more of like information, but entertainment. If that makes sense.
No, yeah, it's we infotain as much as possible. And there's still like a range of tones to our episodes where there are some that are just madcap zany, like whatever, like anything goes. Like we'll just, whatever we're talking about, like we'll do, all kinds of crazy stuff. We'll have jokes. We'll barely talk about the game sometimes. Most of the time it's in between, but and then there's other games where it'll be like a strategy game or something like that, and it'll be really granular. It'll be like a tight, like 50 minutes of talking about like Herzog's Vi or something like that.
Yeah. It's funny because that you bring that up, because I think there's a lot of overlap with that too. So like I was listening to this is a long time ago now, but pandemic, it just feels like everything was in March. You guys had done an episode on Mr. Mosquito, and there was so much good information in there, but I couldn't stop laughing the entire time because you were making jokes, but like really like the information made it so much funnier anyway. Like you can't hide around the humor, and you guys bring that out, and so I really like that, and that's why the show's so entertaining.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I really appreciate that. I mean, I try not to promise that because I feel like this show benefits from its kind of varied tones. But there are some people who are like they're big, like they really like Cal and Clade and Tax, and hearing them do their war game stuff. And I used to appear on those episodes, and it was like, well, who am I kidding? Like, all I'm doing is wasting everybody's time. Like, let them do it. Like, nobody needs to hear from me on this. And other people really like the ones where it's like me and Slow Beef or something, just like riffing on nonsense. I think we did one where it's like some helicopter game for the NES, and it was just we couldn't.
Tiger Heli.
Yeah, I don't think it's Tiger Heli. It was
no. I remember which episode you're talking about, but I don't remember.
Cobra Attack Copter or something, like Cobra Command, maybe.
Let's hold that thought, because we need to bring in our next track.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
This for a while. So this is Impossible One from Cho Ren Sha 68K.
that was Impossible 1 from Chorensha 68K, composed by Ruzarin Kashiwagi.
You know, I was getting a mix of New Jack Swing and Castlevania, so I'm just going to call that New Drac Swing.
God.
Yeah, there we go. I was waiting for the first real groaner of the night.
And there's also like a little bit of Eddie Van Halen like finger tap in there too. Like,
Yeah, okay.
It's like almost like Power Rangers, right? It's like it reminds me of Power Rangers.
Yeah. No, I hear that.
That's
I totally
honestly
hear that.
not what I was expecting from this track at all. Actually, because I've played this game. It's like a shoot 'em up. I don't remember the music. I was expecting your, fast 170 beats per minute rock, double bass, and that's not what we got at all.
It's very different. It's very alarming in the beginning, figuratively and literally. This track is actually one of the first. I want to say this is one of the first X68K game soundtracks that I had listened to entirely before playing the game. In my early years of game audio exploration, it's really good.
Yeah, it's great, right? Like it's got so much to it. Like one of the problems I have when I cut these things down to make outros out of them is that I only want the music only part to be like between like 30 and 40 seconds. I don't want to take up too much time where it's just music, because then people start feeling like maybe there's something after this, and you got to fade out eventually. And like the thing I kind of tell myself is there's a cool part coming up. I know it, but the listener doesn't know it, and they won't care that it's missing because they don't know it's there. So you just fade it out, and like if they want to look it up and discover it later, that's great. But they don't know it's gone. They don't know what they're missing, so it sounds fine to them. And there's a lot of times where these songs like fade out before like something really cool happens, and I just have to know secretly in my heart that it's really good.
And have that emptiness burning feeling where like, oh, it's just missing.
Yeah.
You just don't listen to your own episodes. That's how you do it.
That reminds me of something super off topic, but there used to be a trend of editing movies to be like completely different films. And I remember one that was like The Shining, edited to be about like a dad who's really happy about his family and his kids, and like basically recut the film, and you lose all context of all of it. If you hadn't seen it, it was just like this happy-go-lucky trailer, and I think you're doing a little bit of that crime yourself.
Yeah, probably.
So let's talk about the composer a little bit. Also goes by the name Loser Kashiwagi. Did some composition for Kaze no Uta, Miko Miku Nurse, and
Otomedius. Yeah, it's another shooting game. Yeah.
Okay. It's also been an arranger for a number of Toho albums. Also Project X Zone I show on there as well, and Galgun, which were, I think those came out even on like Switch, stuff like that recently, like 2015, 16, around there.
Yeah, not huge credits, but pretty active for a good 20 years or so.
Yeah. So, yeah, good track. The whole soundtrack is pretty fun to listen to. It's on VGM Rips, I believe. So you can check it out there. Moving on, we've been talking about your podcast, Top 47K Games, the entire episode, but we haven't really talked about what the idea is behind it. You mentioned kind of its origins, which is kind of funny. So you rank games, which it actually kind of sounds like a joke, right? Because how could you possibly do that? But there is method there, and it's really interesting to see how you guys come up with these rankings.
Yeah. So the full title is Top 47,858 Games of All Time, and I actually had different numbers and alternate titles with different stupid numbers in there, and I had people vote on what they thought was the funniest number. And that was the one that won. And the point of that title was to kind of poke fun at the concept of like a top games list in the first place. It's like if you have a list that's will one day be 47,858 games long, then like it's almost meaningless. Like there's no editorial insight there that's cutting things down and making things meaningful. It's just like a big loud blast of information noise. And that's kind of what I wanted. I wanted it to be very tongue-in-cheek, but the idea was that you could actually get a lot of fun, I guess, out of talking about games in comparison to other games that have very little to do with each other. So, like, if you want to say, like, is Carmen Sandiego like better or worse than like Snatcher? You know what I mean? Like, that's a stupid conversation to have, but it's actually kind of funny if you can make it work. To my sort of horror, I've found that like the audience still takes it seriously despite everything. Like we have literally, I'm looking right at it right now. Like we have a 50-cent piece that is the coin of science. And if the hosts are deadlocked on a ranking, we just flip the coin.
Yeah.
And like if that doesn't get the point across, I don't know what will. But other than that, like I do try to use the list for good when I can. So like we kind of tend to try to boost lesser known games and kind of put them maybe a little bit higher than maybe we otherwise would, because we feel like more people need to play them. And other games with that, like everybody's talked about the death, usually those go high too, to be honest. I don't really.
I've tried quite a few games on the list that I had never heard of as
just
a result
because
of the show.
Yeah, absolutely.
House and Fata Morgana is one of my favorite games I've ever played. I mean, it's a wonderful visual novel, and I don't mean that as a pejorative. It's just a great game, but I'd never heard of it, and it was. I don't know. You was sort of, you were very vague about it because you didn't. I don't think you were on that specific episode.
That one, yeah,
but it was like, okay, so you're not just highlighting, okay, this isn't the top list of your dooms, and although they're up there, right. But I don't know, that stuff like that I think is what makes the show valuable as you were saying, as an infotainment or an edutainment, or what did you call it?
Infotainment, yeah. I mean, the hard thing is it's really hard to know when you're infotaining and when you're just infoing or taining, it's a delicate balance. But I really like that House of Fata Morgana episode. That was a really good one because I feel like they made a very strong case for, even if you're not crazy about visual novels or you never tried one, this is an example of the genre at its best. And that is, we do try to do that. We try to boost the weirdos when we can,
and knock Riven down to its rightful place.
Yeah, and it's
no, you know what though, to second what you're saying there is that it's really hard. I mean, even jokes aside with the ranking, it's hard to place something that isn't nostalgic and then reverse do the same thing for something that is like, in my opinion, when you guys did the Tetris episode and you ranked it number 1, like that felt so fitting to me. But I also know that, like, I mean, that was a great episode because you guys broke down like the mathematics about why the game makes you feel so good when you get it, when you Tetrisize or whatever. But there's been other games that really were brought to my attention because of your show that I was like, you know what? I don't have any back reference for this, but like, saying that this game was special because it introduced something kind of, organically on its own that now is a main staple for gaming. Like those kind of things I think are really good to showcase.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. We try to point out at least one thing that the game does that is interesting or unique or different that distinguishes it from the others. And whenever we can. And a lot of times that involves like finding something really that you really love about a game that is on the merits not that great. And I think because the list is now so big, there's like a nice area for games like that where you can like put, like, one of my favorite games I played recently was Cambria Sword, which is like a Dojin shoot 'em up game based on like microbiological fossils in the Burgess Shale, right? Like about these like little super primitive organisms, and they just get blown up, and it gets turned into a shoot 'em up. And it's like the game is like it's like a shoot 'em up that's 7 hours long. It's all wrong. Like every impulse was followed, and probably shouldn't have been. But at the same time, like it's so true to itself and so unique that like I have to give it credit. Like it's probably like out of close to 800 games, I think it's around like the low 500s or high 600s or something. But we still feel it. Like I still felt like that game. Games like that deserve their audience. We should probably move on to another track here.
No. And it's funny that you bring up the around the 500s or something like that. Like I don't know how you guys keep track. I know you have a spreadsheet, but I can't remember. Maybe it's old age, I don't know, but I just can't remember. Like did we rank that like 200s, 300, 400, 5, I don't know, it was somewhere in there.
I certainly don't remember most rankings in particular, except for like the very top and bottom of the list. But
right.
I do, I have a general idea, but oftentimes I'm just wrong. Like I just don't remember things at all. And that happens too. And yeah, the list is arbitrary in some ways, but I think that hopefully is part of its charm.
There's some truth to it, I think.
Well, of course. But I mean, at the same time, what other chance do you get to talk about games like Frog Fractions, which would never make anybody's top list of best games of all time, except in a show where you pretty much whatever gets sent your way is played almost.
Right. Yeah. And that's like part of it too, is you get to see like the reviewer's bias for the new and different in effect, because at this point, like we've all played a bunch of, because I didn't really mention this, but especially earlier on, we were very entirely dependent on listener submissions, like listener nominations. And we've kind of branched off from that. So we do that still, but there's like fewer and fewer places where people can leave those nominations. So in order to flesh out the schedule, we're picking our own. And we found that like, because of the just sheer volume of stuff we've had to play, that the stuff that we like now is usually just weird stuff that stands out as like, this is different. I like this. And sometimes it's just like, this is a short game and I really appreciate that. But, you know, but it's stuff like that where, you know, I'm just like, yeah, I know it's not great, but I still like, I like it that it exists. And I wish, you know, I appreciate it for just being completely different than what I've had to do before.
That totally makes sense.
Let's jump into another track.
Yeah, let's jump into another track here. This is opening title from Division Guardian, Twinkle-Star. That was the opening title theme from Division Guardian Twinkle-Star, composed by Hiroaki Sano for the PC-98, released in 1993. This is a great track.
It just puts a smile on my face. I was grinning the whole time. I've never heard this track before, but it's just so upbeat. I love it.
This is an like defining like anime opening title theme. This is so much energy and positive. Like, I think of this reminds me of a Magic Knight Ray Earth, something that's just like so innocent and powerful, has the really like strong female leads, and I don't know.
Yeah, you can sort of imagine like what kind of words would be sung over this, and something about believing in yourself, following your star, et cetera, that kind of thing.
Exactly,
you know?
Exactly. Cool. Yeah, why'd you pick this track?
I mean, it was one of the songs I used for the outro, and it is again because it has that nice shift that happens fairly early in the song, and you know, so like I think it's like actually just like the first 10 seconds, and I looped that for about 40 seconds to make enough space for me to talk over it, and yeah, it works pretty well. I like this one because I don't really know anything about the game at all, actually, but something about being a chiptune enthusiast, especially for like 90s Japanese microcomputers, right? Like there's something about that where I wonder whether you're secretly like an early 90s J-pop fan, you just don't know it.
I always wonder that.
Right? Because you listen to stuff from that time period, or like, you know, like TV show theme songs and stuff, and you get a sense of like this. I can sense if this were a chiptune, I would really like this. But as it is, it's horrible. It's not bad actually. It's just I'm not used to that. Those
like if
mannerisms
this was like released last year by some J-pop band and there was singing on top of it, I'd be like, God, what is this garbage?
This is horrible. Yeah. But at the same time, the internet brought us back all of that city pop from the algorithms, which suddenly had a huge resurgence for artists that haven't been performing in 30 years. So there's something to be said for what's old is new again.
It's true.
Exactly.
It's interesting how chiptunes can take something, because I think a lot of times the composers of this music, they thought they were doing something else, right? They thought they were doing something that this could have been like a hit song for like a boy band or whatever, or an idol singer or something like that in the early 90s. And that's what they felt like they were doing. But when we encounter it here, when we don't have that context, it sounds different to us. And I don't know whether there's any, I mean, it's the kind of thing that can never be proven, right? Because it's all subjective. It's all, the way it's, individual responses. But I wonder whether that's what it really is. It's like we're all closet 90s J-pop fans, and it just never occurred to us that the composer thought of somebody singing over this.
I'm curious, real quick, where did you first hear this?
I just found a website that was like an archive of all kinds of old like microcomputer tunes. Okay. And I just went through game by game, clicking on the games that sounded like they might have.
If it's VGM Rips, if that was it, I'm the one that did this pack.
Oh yeah,
so, yeah.
I'm sure it is from the rip you made. I think I got it because at the shows I need. I don't like to have to get the raw file. I always want to get the MP3 so I can easily incorporate it into the show without futzing with the.
Might be on Zofar. I know they have a lot of MP3 versions of a lot of the stuff that we ripped.
There's like a Kingdom Hearts fan page that has like
KH Insider or something like that.
Whatever reason, they've also got a huge like chiptune library, and so almost everything that ends up in the show comes from there because it's the fastest, easiest way to find it. And all I do is I would just type in like PC 98 and just go down like a huge list of games and click on stuff that sounded promising, and that's all I did. It's still all I do. I've got like a folder.
That's how we find a lot of our music. I mean, honestly, sometimes you just listen to stuff that you wouldn't expect. I mean, at this point, I think I've heard every PC 98, PC 88 soundtrack I could, that exists, but I still surprise myself. But yeah, sometimes I'll just randomly click on like a game about sneaker men or something like that, and all of a sudden it's like the coolest soundtrack I've heard in the last year. So
or more often it's some kind of like creepy tentacle thing or whatever, but I don't know that, and it doesn't matter. Like it doesn't matter.
I feel like for us, I mean, I still play a lot of games, but game music is almost like you're using a game as like it's an orange. You're just there to juice it and get the good part and throw the rest away. Like you don't care how the game is or what it's about or how it plays. Has it got good music? Great. Let's rip it. Let's listen to it.
Yeah,
exactly. I think we even played a track from this on another episode too, from this exact game.
Maybe. Yeah. I know I've seen Hiroaki Sano on our show somewhere.
I think it was an expansion pack.
Yeah,
it would have been. I think so the translated name, Division Guardian, we probably would have given it the Japanese name, so Bunretsu Shugoshin Twinkle-Star or something like that. So
you're right. Episode 77. I used our search on our website.
Yeah, that's the only way I can find anything with that. But anyways, we did play a track from this because it's a good soundtrack, so totally makes sense.
Yeah,
you got it.
It's always great when you find, I mean, for you guys, it's perfect when you find a game that just has like nothing to just banger after banger. And, but for me, like I need to get that one particular song. And a lot of times, like, I don't care where I get it from. If it's from like an Amiga billiards game or whatever, so be it. Like some of them are really good for what I want them to do, but they aren't great for like just listening in some cases. But
yeah. So let's get into our next track here. What do we got?
I got a track from Puyo Puyo 2. And this was from the Genesis version rather than the arcade version. I think it's one of the ending songs. It's called Ending B, and it appears in most versions of Puyo Puyo 2. And for some reason, I absolutely love this, and it's like perfect for me. And you'll probably realize why that is when you hear it. So we can just take a listen and see whether you can read my mind here.
That was Ending B from Puyo Puyo Tsu, composed by Tsuyoshi Matsushima for the Mega Drive, released in 1994. And yeah, definitely a banger. And I'm going to take a stab at the mindset for this one. You got that really nice bubbly intro that goes on, and all of a sudden you got this pause, and then bam, hits you right with this this nice. Did I nail it?
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's just like, hangs up for a second. Yeah,
it seems like it just it strings you on, and then bam, unleashes like the beauty of this totally bouncy track. So.
I will also say, though, it sounds like you're very particular to fast-moving basses. Even though you haven't expressed it, it's one of those hidden desires.
Yeah, it must be. it must be. Like, I really do. Like, I'm all about that bass. And I think on this one, when I edited it together into the outro, I actually extended the pause for like maybe a half a second just to get a little bit more juice out of it. And I love it so much. And there's one other thing about it that just listening to it now reminded me of what I love so much. It's like right before the loop starts over, right? It's got this sliding crescendo, right? For I don't know what it is, like the saw wave or whatever. It's like, it's like, it just sets it up right back at the beginning. It's perfect. And that's right when I want to fade out, right? And it's, it just makes you feel, I mean, even if the episode was okay, right? After listening to that, you feel like, I got something.
Great.
That was a great episode.
That's basically the whole mask of our show. We just like put in good music, and it makes us look a little better than we are.
Yeah, and if they want to tune out to hearing my voice, then they just listen to the music and the bedding, and they're good. It's the trick, folks.
This is a great track. It's funny you brought up earlier, like, secretly we all love J-pop or something like that. But in all truth, like, it's funny because this kind of music, like, kind of outside of game audio, like outside of chiptunes, like it wouldn't be what I would turn to. But when I know it has more to it than just some sound, some bright sounds, when I know that there's like programming and math behind it, and actually it fits with some kind of context, that makes me appreciate it even more. But this kind of bouncy sound, I really do like it. Again, I wouldn't just be listening to this, like this kind of music if it was like released in 2018 pop or something like that, but there is this, I guess this warm era that I like, because I remember these kind of games, like the 90s Mega Drive stuff, like that had a really lasting impact on me. NES, Super NES, all this stuff had, and so I can still gravitate towards those sounds, even though it's not the typical, not the style of music I would just listen to from like a band or something like that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. And one thing I do got to bring up about this is there's this analogy that I've heard a lot, that the same thing applies to the graphics. When, you have to leave things to the imagination. I've heard people say this about, like, why is Final Fantasy VI so much less embarrassing than, Final Fantasy 7 or 8? It's because we were filling a lot of the blanks. This is the same thing with the music. This may be playing genres that we don't normally like, but because of the limitations, all we're really hearing is the strong melodies, the musical elements. I mean, if you render nu metal in full resolution, it's going to sound exactly like that. And, well, I don't want to say nobody wants that, but it hasn't aged terribly well. And so I think there's a certain kind of, like, you can't rely on production to mask good music. So the stuff that sticks out in our mind is the stuff that, the core is there. And there's good songwriting in every single genre, country, J-pop, all of that
absolutely,
stuff. Yeah,
absolutely.
I don't think there's a genre I wouldn't listen to the best of it. Yeah, personally.
I mean, the thing about J-pop or any kind of like bubbly pop genre from any culture that doesn't appeal to me is, I gotta like say, it's kind of like saying like McDonald's tastes bad, right? It's like, it doesn't taste bad. They like spent millions of dollars testing this out. Like, what ratio of like salt to bread do we need to make you feel like this is good? It tastes good on purpose. Like, it's not like the same kind of good as like a 4-course meal from like a French, chef or something like that. But it's not like Ratatouille's making it for you, right? But it definitely tastes good. Right. And it tastes good for a reason. It's like the people who made it know what they're doing. And that's the thing about like that pop music, is that it sticks in your head for a reason. And it's like, yeah, there's like a distance from it that when you listen to it, the actual J-pop stuff from like 1994 or whenever this came out, doesn't sound good to us. But at the same time, it's like it was a big hit. Like millions of people loved it. There must have been a reason.
I'm not gonna lie, a ton of J-pop. Like when I was living there, you can't avoid hearing J-pop everywhere. No matter, even if you hate it, it doesn't matter. Like you'll hear it everywhere in supermarkets, in stores, on the train, like everywhere. And so even to this day, I have like random J-pop that pops into my head too sometimes, and I'm just like, man, I'm so embarrassed if I sang this out loud right now, but it happens.
Yeah, while I'm there, I hate it. I'm so tired of it.
Exactly.
Because it is everywhere. They're like selling like, hey, it's like, elder care homes. Like here's like a bouncy, J-pop song. It's like, send your grandma to our place. We'll take good care of her. But it is like, it's catchy. And there's like a craft that goes into it. And maybe that's the thing about chiptunes from this time period is they help you. There's just enough distance to that, or it's just associated enough with a thing you like that you can connect with it on the writer, the creator's intended level or something. And I think I just got one more.
Yeah.
track.
You know what? Yeah, we want to wrap things up here. We've kind of just gone on these long tangents. It's been so much fun having you on. First of all, thank you so much for taking the time.
Oh yeah, it's fun.
You're East Coast, and so you're meeting us. For us it's late, so for you it's very late.
Kind of late, yeah.
Yeah. So really appreciate it, and just
I don't mind,
shoot the breeze with us. It's been great.
That's the I just like you know what? I like to talk, and I don't care. How late it is. I'll probably just keep talking. But yeah, no, that's the magic of podcasting, right? It's a conversation that people can feel like they're involved in, even though we can't hear them.
Well, we do hope that we have you on again in the future. I mean, seriously, I think that it would be really fun to bring you and also some of your other co-hosts onto the show, because I think there is a lot of kind of cross talk in our podcast. So I don't know if Gene brought this up earlier. I can't remember now, but like we do kind of consider ourselves like the hardcore gaming of VGM.
Game audio.
Oh, yeah.
And so, we don't dive as deep into the games, but we try to dive as deep as we can into the sound production, the composers, and the sound hardware as much as, possible, and try to make it entertaining too. So, I think there is a lot of overlap with our shows in that regard. So hopefully we can get you and some of your co-hosts on and talk about more game music.
Yeah.
I think it'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah. Something of particular interest is that you and the crew dig into some of the weirdest games that I don't think anybody would even think to look at. And we do the same kind of thing, but maybe not even to the level that you have to do for top 47K games. And I am just like really curious what you have dug up over the years.
I mean, the thing is, I forget it awfully fast is kind of a problem. But yeah, I mean, I think the same could be said though, like for your show, like you guys would fit right in. So like, and there's some stuff that you probably know more about than we do easily, just because of where your interests have taken you.
If it's in the music realm, maybe, but I don't know. We'll see.
All right. So we got one more track before we go into our outro section. This is, I guess, the second of three endings we've got right now. This is ending 1 from Rhyme Star, composed by Takeshi Abo.
Oh, our man, Takeshi Abo. All right.
Man.
Let's take a listen. All right, that was Ending 1 from Rhymestar, composed by Takeshi for the PC 98, released in 1994. Takeshi is a huge proponent of what we love on this show. Like, we had him on an interview back in episode 87, and he's one of the composers I actually still regularly chat with. And just a brilliant composer, and has so much fun doing it.
I'm such a huge fan of his music. He's one of these. I definitely would never have heard of him if I hadn't gotten involved this deeply with the VGM community. Like, you got to go like 1 or 2 levels below, Yuzo Koshiro, my favorite person to compare him to in this era, to really even know that his music exists. But he's been making music for Steins Gate and Chaos Child, so he's made a pretty big name for himself in certain circles, and more power to him. I think he deserves all the credit.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about like how some of these songs sound like they could be J-pop or like an anime, credits song or something. This one sounds so much like that. It sounds so much like it's the ending credits for like a magical girl like cartoon show or something like that. Where sometimes I have to check, and I've been surprised at times where I've put a chiptune into the show, and I find out later it's actually just a chiptune version of like a TV show song. It's kind of embarrassing. Like I didn't know what Yu Yu Hakusho was, and I put a song from the Mega Drive game,
which is a great soundtrack.
And they're like, somebody's like, "Oh, you're a Yu Yu Hakusho fan?" And I was like, "Well, I like the song I used. I don't." And then I find out it's a big thing. Like, it's a thing I probably should have known about, but I didn't. Yeah, but this one you could almost swear that you can see the credits rolling on this one. Yeah, I mean, it is the ending song for the game, but
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it sounds so like it's I don't know what.
There's a lot of times, bringing up the same thing. There's a lot of times where Gene and I will look at a show or look at a soundtrack, and it's from a game that clearly was an anime. It was based on an anime, and we're listening to this track. And we're like, God, this is such a good track. I really hope it's not like the theme song for this anime, because it like embodies like the perfect ending of an anime when the credits are rolling. And sure enough,
it turns out, it's just like the credits theme for the show or whatever. It's hard because I think some of the things that we dig into are so. I mean, there's like animes that were just ran for a season or two and nobody really cares about, so it's kind of hard to vet those things.
Right.
True.
Yeah, I mean, it's also. It's kind of the weird sort of, I don't know what, crate digging mentality or something for chiptune enthusiasts, that we want it to be this undiscovered gem. We don't want to find out that this they were selling fried chicken with this song. You want it to be something that, I discovered it. I'm the archaeologist who found this, and it would be lost to obscurity. I'm finding some secret cool thing that nobody else knows about in my country, and actually, like, everybody who was like buying like $60 VHS tapes with like 2 episodes of Slayers on it knows this song, and you didn't because you weren't privy to that sphere of entertainment. And it's like, does that make it less good? No, but it feels less good because you want to be the guy who discovered
a little bit robbed.
Right.
Yeah,
because it's not as underground as you thought it was.
Yeah, exactly.
Luckily, the only people we're competing with on Harold Hardtooth are the Danish kids who had like a computer at their school.
Yeah.
Like, this is a sort of related thing, but you guys, like, you talked about something about how you find out some of these games had had CDs that would come with them or something, or like arranged versions that would just they made, and maybe they were just like like a Roland synthesizer doing it instead of the Yamaha chip,
actual chip. Yeah,
but like the idea is like finding some of that stuff is almost impossible. And that reminds me, like, I don't think we've ranked this game for the current show, but we did a game, like, it was like a Polish DOS game called Electro Man, and that game was inspired by, it had almost no soundtrack, but it was inspired by like house music from like Detroit in the very early 90s. And it was like a subgenre of house music called electro body, which just the term itself is so evocative of what it probably sounds like. And we found out that there was like a cassette tape that was sold with this game that you were supposed to listen to while you played it. And we just so desperately,
what?
I think we emailed the guy who made it, and he said even he doesn't have a copy anymore. It's just lost forever. But yeah, it was
Darn,
it's
now
some of these things.
Electro Body.
But I just thought I'd put that out because I just remembered that maybe somebody in your audience might have the Electro Man / Electro Body cassette tape.
As soon as this episode's out, we're gonna have like 3 people saying like, "Hey, I got it."
Oh yeah, of course I've got it. I mean, don't you?
Yeah, everybody's got
it's
it.
in my
Yeah,
permanent
but I just
rotation.
I stupidly we contacted the guy who made it, and he's like, "No, I don't have it. I don't know what you're talking about. Why do you? You're the first person to talk to me about Electro Man in like 25 years
since I wrote the yeah." Anyways,
so this is probably a good time to we got to wrap it up, but I did want to say that you guys will both be joining us on HG101 because we're going to be talking about Pac-Man Championship Edition DX Plus, whatever the first one that's on Steam is, where it's like, you know, the
whatever
Pac-Man
the one I have
update.
is. Yeah.
And I think it's going to be really cool because I've been looking forward to that game for a long time. I really, really love it.
Oh yeah, it's a wonderful game, and like all Namco games, it has a really awesome soundtrack. Very highly electronic, but that's right up my alley.
It's going to be a good one.
Yeah,
sure.
I don't know when that's happening. Probably sometime in the next year or so. But like our schedule is so attenuated, like it's so far reaching into the future that like we'll say like, oh, someone's coming on the show. Like you'll hear about it in like October 2021. But it will happen, I promise.
And we'll be there.
We're looking forward to it. It's going to be great.
Hopefully, all the COVID stuff will be long behind us, but I don't think that's ever going to happen. So today, we covered a lot of great music brought to us by Xerxes of Hardcore Gaming 101. So glad that you were able to spend the time, spend your evening hanging out with us, chatting about this game audio and just about your history in gaming. Because it's nice to put we hear you talking about games and stuff like that, but we don't really get to hear about your backstory as much. So it's nice to be able to put a more personal touch on the name. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh yeah, my pleasure. I'm glad we got something. I was worried I wasn't going to have anything to say. And
we could talk all night. This is going way longer than I expected us to. Do you have any plugs you want to make for either Hardcore Gaming 101 or any other projects you're working on?
That's pretty much all I'm doing these days. Check it out. I think the Hardcore Gaming 101 website also puts out books that I have usually nothing to do with, but they're always very good. And I'm not really sure. There's got to be something come out. I think we've got like a JRPGs like a tome of sorts that covers all kinds of weird stuff. But we just I think maybe less than a year ago we put out one called Classic Japanese Gaming Obscurities or something, and that seems like something that would fit right in with your listeners. It's a beautiful book. You can get it hardcover. It's got fantastic like page layouts. If you're like me and you really like coffee table books that you'll read like 30 pages of and then just admire forever without finishing, it's really good. It's like one of these days I'll finish it, but it looks great.
Awesome.
And,
you also did one on French developers, which is another area we've been kind of digging into recently. It's kind of this like slightly under the radar community of game development that I think is just fascinating to everyone except for the French.
Yeah. I mean, people only nominate the really like weird stuff is the problem. But yeah, they've got a great history there. They've got their own like microcomputer history in France and elsewhere. So yeah, it's a great idea.
That brings me up to another point that I wanted to make. We did a long time ago. We did an episode about Illusion Blaze, a Korean game, and the Korean gaming scene in the 90s was super fascinating because I mean we look at it from like a Western or like Japanese perspective, but it's like Korea and China, like those are areas that we kind of don't know as much about. At least I didn't, and so I spent some time in Korea, but like I didn't really look at the older like the early game scene, and there was this really good article that basically was kind of like the Bible for us until we started finding. We got deeper and deeper into some of the tracks. We actually managed to find the composer and interview him. It was Sui Hong Ro for that game.
Oh, awesome.
And he like met us. He met us. He was like at work and like just walked into a conference room and like did the interview from his iPhone. It was it was cool. Great. But yeah, so I mean the website is like a just trove of treasure that even the old stuff is just so applicable to any new stuff that you want to look at, I think. So
yeah, I was just reading that HG101 article recently. There is so much good information in there on stuff that, like, even compared to Japanese stuff, is you would need a guide and I'd like a person that could walk you through the industry at the time to even figure out what to be looking for.
Yeah.
So it's a really valuable resource.
It's great. Yeah.
Anyways, if you want to know more about our show, you can check us out online at pixelatedaudio.com for our show notes, the track list. We can also be found at Pixelated Audio at Twitter, and we're on Discord. Hardcore Gaming 101 has a Discord as well, so we can put the link for that in our show notes if you don't mind, Xerxes.
Yeah, no problem.
There's always great chatter on our server, and I've been in the HG101 server for a long time as well, and always welcome feedback. So if there's anything that you like, you don't like, let us know. We will definitely take it all to heart.
I especially love when I get some minor detail wrong and somebody tells me about it. That's my favorite thing.
That's my favorite thing to
So, well, if you're new to our show, we have this tradition where we always usually end with some of our past episodes, but I specifically picked some of our favorites that are also reviewed on Top 47K Games.
Oh, cool.
We got one of my favorites, of course, Gabriel Knight, Sins of the Fathers with Robert Holmes. Number 38, Rystar, and 9, The Outfoxies.
That was recent. The Outfoxies.
Not for us, but for you it was.
Right. Oh, yeah. Well, that's what I meant.
All three of those games, we just did those like in the last, probably 5 months or so.
Yeah, the Outfoxies, that was one of our first, top 10 episodes, our first ones?
Yeah, number 9. It's going back almost 5-6 years now.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a great one.
A long time. Anyways, so we got one more track taken off the show, or we're still doing that, or no?
We do, yeah.
So let's end the show here. This is a really great one. Can you let us know the track and why you picked it?
I forget. The track would be. It's from. Are we doing the Possessioner one? So it's from Possessioner, which keeping with the theme, I think is another erotic game of sorts, and I don't really know much more about it, but I've always loved this ending tune, and it's a lot of ending tunes on this episode. I apologize for that, but that's what I work with. And,
it's good stuff.
It'll be interesting to hear this episode end like an episode of our show. So until next time, keep keeping it real.